Six iPhones. Apple is reportedly launching six iPhones this cycle, and you can't buy most of them until 2027, instead of introducing four new iPhones in September 2026. The iPhone 18 lineup will come out across fall 2026 and spring 2027. The more expensive iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max launch in September as usual, alongside the first foldable iPhone. The standard iPhone 18 and iPhone 18e won't land until spring 2027. The cheap ones delayed. The expensive ones, including a $2,000 foldable, those ship first. Apple is literally telling budget buyers to sit tight while it rolls out the $1099, $1199, and $2,000 models and collects the money. But here's the twist that nobody's connecting. The iPhone 18 Pro's biggest camera feature, a variable aperture on the main camera, is a technology that Samsung invented called a gimmick and killed. And what Apple's doing with it now, I genuinely didn't see this coming. All right, here's the landscape. Apple's iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max are shaping up as significant upgrades, debuting alongside the company's first foldable iPhone in September 2026, with rumors pointing to a smaller dynamic island, a variable aperture main camera, a more efficient 2nm A20 Pro chip, and potentially record-breaking battery life. That sounds like a stacked year. Until you learn that the foldable, the product people have been waiting literally a decade for, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman said there is no doubt the iPhone Fold will ship a bit later than the iPhone 18 Pro. How much later? Barclays analyst Tim Long suggested the foldable iPhone won't ship until December, suggesting a roughly 3-month delay. December, you're going to sit through Apple's September keynote, watch Tim Cook talk about this beautiful foldable phone, and then just wait for 3 months. While Apple shows you ads for a thing you can't have, and if you're someone who buys the regular iPhone, if you typically buy a standard iPhone model, you won't be able to get a new one in the fall because Apple wants to save its less expensive iPhone models for early 2027. This is either the most arrogant launch strategy in Apple history or the most brilliant, possibly both. But the camera situation is where this gets really interesting and where a 7-year-old Samsung decision comes back to haunt everyone. Let's start with what actually matters to most people. The camera. Apple has never used a variable aperture on an iPhone camera before. The main cameras on all of the iPhone 14 Pro through iPhone 17 Pro models have a fixed aperture of f1.78, and the lens is always fully open, always. You press the shutter, it takes in the same amount of light every single time, and computational photography does the rest. Think of it like this. Your current iPhone camera is wearing sunglasses that it can never take off. Bright daylight, sunglasses, dim restaurant, same sunglasses, candlelit dinner. Buddy, you guessed it. Sunglasses, the software just does its best to compensate. A variable aperture feature for the main camera on the iPhone 18 Pro lineup would mark a first for iPhones, allowing dynamic adjustment of light intake to the sensor, improving exposure control, especially in video, reducing overexposure in bright scenes, and offering better creative control over depth of field and background blur. That's not a spec bump, that's a fundamental change in how the camera works mechanically with actual moving parts. And honestly, this part annoyed me because every year Apple gives the best stuff exclusively to the Pro models and tells everyone else to deal with it. This year is no different. The larger aperture telephoto lens is exclusive to the iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max. Even though Apple's iPhone 18 line could consist of 6 new models, the telephoto camera is expected to remain limited to Pro models. The regular iPhone 18, iPhone Fold, iPhone Air 2, and iPhone 18's second rear cameras will all reportedly be ultra wide. No telephoto, no variable aperture, just an ultra wide. Thanks, Apple. Now, here's a detail I need you to remember. The variable aperture isn't just about the main camera. Beyond the main camera upgrade, Apple is testing improvements to both main and telephoto cameras with larger apertures, promising significant advances in night photography capabilities, main and telephoto, both getting larger apertures. That's going to matter when we talk about what this means for the Fold. Hold that thought. But here's where I have to tell you a story because the history of this feature is genuinely hilarious. Back in 2018, Samsung's Galaxy S9 quietly introduced one of the most ingenious camera innovations in smartphone history, a dual aperture system. While the rest of the industry was fixated on adding more lenses and cranking up megapixel counts, Samsung built a camera that could literally change how much light hit the sensor, switching between f1.5 for low light and f2.4 for sharp daylight photos. That was supposed to be the future. Samsung marketing went hard on it. The camera reimagined. It was on every billboard, but the S9 phone's variable aperture was widely considered a gimmicky camera feature that didn't make it far into Samsung's flagship lineup. The Galaxy Note 10 series were the last phones that used it. Due to increased thickness and high price, Samsung dropped the feature in 2020, gone, dead. Samsung essentially said, yeah, that was cool, but it's too thick and too expensive, nobody really needs it. And the internet agreed, everyone called it a gimmick. Now, here's where most people get this completely wrong. The problem with Samsung's version wasn't the idea. Both the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus came with only two aperture values, f1.5 and f2.4. The devices could switch between them depending on the surrounding light, but couldn't switch to numbers in between. Two settings, on or off. That's not a variable aperture, that's a toggle. It's like saying your car has variable speed because it has first gear and fifth gear with nothing in between. Okay, everything I just explained, that was the setup. Here's what I actually brought you here for. Samsung has now requested the development of variable aperture technology from multiple camera module partners. Why the iPhone? Of course, Apple has plans to bring variable aperture camera tech to the iPhone 18 series, and Samsung is making this move for the sake of camera competitiveness. Let me make sure you're tracking this. Samsung invents variable aperture for phones. Samsung kills variable aperture for phones. Apple picks up variable aperture for phones. Samsung now rushes to bring back variable aperture for phones because Apple is doing it. That is the most Samsung thing that has ever happened. And look, I love Samsung. They take huge swings, but this is the corporate equivalent of throwing away your Halloween candy, watching your friend eat the exact same candy, and then digging through the trash to get it back. Just beautiful stuff. But here's why Apple's version might actually work where Samsung's didn't. 6 years of technological advancement would transform how variable aperture works. We're not talking about the same two setting system from the Galaxy S9. Modern actuators could potentially offer multiple stops across a wider range. The camera could make micro adjustments based on scene analysis, subject distance, and lighting conditions, all happening invisibly in the background. And combined with Apple's computational photography, the integration of variable aperture with Apple's existing computational photography promises the best of both worlds. Mechanical precision enhanced by software intelligence. That's not a gimmick. That's what Samsung should have built. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the very expensive, very delayed, possibly creaseless elephant. Remember when I said hold the camera thought? The iPhone Fold won't be able to deliver flagship camera performance due to form factor constraints. That's the quiet part Apple isn't saying out loud. You're paying $2,000 or more for a phone that can't have the best cameras because it needs to be thin enough to fold. The phone could feature a Touch ID power button instead of Face ID to maintain a slim design, no Face ID, on a $2,000 iPhone in 2026. The thickness of the module needed to create 3D images for secure facial recognition makes it impossible for Apple to include it with the first iPhone Fold. They literally can't make it thin enough and still fit Face ID inside. Gurman believes Apple will eventually be able to fit Face ID into a foldable iPhone, though he believes it could take at least a couple of years. He sees it as a matter of time. So you're beta testing. Let's just be honest about that. But there is one thing about this phone that might justify the price, and it's the thing Apple reportedly spent years refusing to compromise on. The 2026 foldable iPhone reportedly has no visible crease. Apple is said to have pursued eliminating the crease regardless of cost, developing a new material property that makes the crease disappear. One of the reasons Apple waited so long to release a foldable is because it struggled to make a device without a visible crease, but it may be a problem now largely solved. Regardless of cost, those are heavy words from the company that sells a monitor stand for $9.99. But if they actually pulled this off, a genuinely creaseless foldable, that changes the conversation. Apple decided on a book-style foldable design that's wider than it is tall, making it unique among foldable smartphones. The foldable iPhone will have a 4:3 aspect ratio, like an iPad, with iPad mini-sized OLED display when opened up. It will look like a hybrid between iPhone and iPad, around 5.5 inches when closed, 7.8 inches when open. Gurman says Apple will focus on using the internal screen for viewing video content and for gaming, not productivity theater, not look, I can run two apps, video and gaming, on a creaseless 7.8-inch OLED. Now that I understand. So here's where I actually land on all of this. The iPhone 18 Pro is the real story this year. Variable aperture on the main camera, a larger aperture telephoto building on the iPhone 17 Pro's 48 megapixel sensor with 8 times zoom, a noticeably smaller dynamic island with the Face ID flood illuminator moving under the display, shrinking the cutout by up to 35%, and the A20 Pro on 2 nanometers, expected to launch in September 2026, pricing likely starting around $10.99 for the Pro and $11.99 for the Pro Max. That's your phone. For most people, that's the move, the iPhone Fold. It's going to be incredible to look at. It'll be the most impressive piece of hardware Apple has built in years, and I genuinely think you should not buy it. Not because it's bad, because it's first gen. No Face ID, limited camera system. Ming Chi Kuo expects supply constraints into 2027, and supply problems or manufacturing issues could explain the delayed shipment date. You'll pay over $2,000 to beta test a product that'll be meaningfully better in 12 months. The quotable version, Apple's building the future this year, but they're only shipping half of it on time. And the camera story, Samsung inventing it, killing it, Apple picking it up, Samsung panicking, that tells you everything about where the smartphone industry actually is right now. Nobody's innovating. They're just taking turns being 6 years late to each other's ideas, and somehow that's still progress. Here's what I'm watching. Gurman says Apple's new chatbot will receive much of the spotlight at Buddy 2026, the week of June 8th. Expected to launch with iOS 27, the Siri chatbot will rival ChatGPT and Gemini. If that chatbot is actually good, and that's a building-sized if, then the combination of new Siri plus the iPhone Fold's bigger screen could be the thing that makes foldables finally make sense. That's a whole different video. And yeah, I'm already pulling that one together. See you next video. Peace.